December 26th, 2004 remains a dark spot in the world history. On that day, there was an earthquake that struck the floor of the Indian Ocean, with west coast of Indonesia as the epicenter. It resulted into a tsunami that claimed the lives of more than 200,000 people. It destroyed property estimated at the cost of $15 billion US dollars.
That's
A lot. But there was something that was so interesting. Consistent reports indicate that animals fled the scenes that were affected by the tsunami weeks to or days to
Interesting.
the tsunami. So it was so interesting. You know, a few days too, we find elephants were breaking their chains. You know, they domesticate elephants in that side. They were breaking their chains and fleeing to the high places. Snakes were climbing trees. Birds were flying away. Even fish, they were attempting to escape from the waters. Now, this has been assumed by many scientists that animals have like the sixth sense that alerts them of danger and then they flee. However, today we want to relate that with the experience of Noah and animals coming into the ark. Is it that they have a sixth sense, or is it that they listen to a voice communicate to them and then they move before destruction happens? Bringing us to today's topic, the amazing grace.
Yes. So we left at a point where Noah entered the ark, him and his family. There are only 8 people inside the ark. When you read Genesis chapter 7 verse 8, it says pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and of all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. You know, we also find the animals, just like you've said, they entered in for safety and they were not destroyed, you know.
Yes.
So was the ark too small to accommodate the whole world at that time?
Now, the indication that they entered into the ark gives us 3 things. The first thing is that there was a civilization Noah's civilization was so sophisticated that they could construct an ark.
Yes.
We find God just giving Noah instruction, construct an ark, but he does not define what an ark is, which means Noah and his people and the people who helped him must have had a knowledge of what an ark looked like.
Yes.
The second thing is that Noah's ark must have been big enough to accommodate the animals and even them. The Bible gives the dimensions, but we want to break them down into meters so that we can all understand.
Yes.
The length of the ark was 155 meters. That is about the size of a football pitch and a half.
Wow, that's
Big.
long.
And then it was so high that it could be the size of a story building, a three-story building. And that is around 15 meters. It had a lower decker, medium decker, and an upper decker. And then it was so wide, it was 25 meters wide. This was an indication that everyone, if what the people were to repent, would fit comfortably in this ark. But humanity rejected the message of grace. The ark, to those who accepted the message, was an instrument of salvation. But to the rejectors of the grace of God, it was like an instrument of condemnation. For 120 years, we don't know how long it took to build the ark, but Noah preached for 120 years. Within that time, he built the ark. Now, as he was preaching, people came, witnessed, heard the message, but rejected it. It was God's way of reaching out to them, as we find in Ezekiel 33 verse 11, that he has no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that he desires that the wicked should turn from their wicked ways and come to him.
Amen.
Now, when they come, God accepts them, but when they reject it, God has to bring an end to iniquity.
Yes. So remember, it took 7 days before the floods came.
Yes.
And when you read Genesis chapter 7 verse 16, it says, then the Lord shut him in. What does that mean?
Now, as we come to the Lord shutting him in, I just remember the story of people committing to reject God's grace. You know,
Yes, tell
you
me.
remember I told you about a pastor who went to preach and he had bought a brand new TX Prado.
Yes.
And he packed it out. As he preached, when he finished preaching, he saw thieves like running away with the car, like they were now driving, they were speeding away. Now, he talked to the elder who had a Mazda Demio, and they started pursuing these thieves. And as the pursuit continued, the gap between the people who had stolen pastor's car and where now the pastor was with the elder was increasing. Pastor, though his car was stolen, smiled at the elder and told the elder, just stop pursuing, you will not find them. The elder was shocked and he asked pastor, why are you saying like that? And then the pastor said, I know my car.
Interesting.
So even God knew his people that when they had committed their minds to iniquity, nothing could change their minds. So he had to perform an act of mercy and bring an end to destruction, to their wickedness. Now back to your question. God had to shut the door of the ark.
Yeah.
Remember, the ark is the vessel of salvation. Noah and the occupants of the ark needed that much grace and salvation. So they had no power to shut, because they are not the ones who originated the idea of salvation.
Yes.
Salvation is an original idea from God. Therefore, no human being, no religious organization can claim to have the power to shut the door of mercy on anyone.
Yes.
It's upon God and God alone to declare the judgment of the heart of a man.
True. Yes. So we find that the flood took place like by the time Noah entered the ark, and by the time he leaves again at God's command, it took 1 year.
Yes.
And Genesis chapter 8 verse 5 says, "Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives." God now tells Noah to come out.
Yes.
This shows about Noah's original culture, which was based on obedience.
Yes.
What happened then?
Imagine Noah had to wait until God tells him to come out. That's the time he starts to come out.
Yes.
Second thing we are observing here is that the animals live orderly, which means they were not so pressed to an extent that when they saw the door open, they would run, or they were not so starved. They live orderly.
Yes.
Now, after they left, then we find something interesting. Noah reminds us of something that Abel did, something that was instituted by God.
Yes.
He offers sacrifice of burnt offering, of the clean animals and the birds to God. Now, something interesting about this is not because he offered the sacrifice. It was a demonstration of his faith in the coming Messiah.
Yes.
You remember the promise in Genesis 3:15?
Yes.
Yes. Now, when they instituted the sacrificial system, it pointed to the coming Messiah. So Noah's faith plus his family on the sacrifice of the lamb that was slain from the foundation of the world impressed God, and therefore we find God coming forth strongly and saying, wow, there is still a people in the world who worship me. Remember, God did not force them to offer the sacrifice. They did it out of their heart.
Yes.
They were willing to do it, and God was impressed. God was moved, and he made a covenant with them. But before the covenant, he declared blessings that I wanted you to talk about.
Yes. So after they offered the sacrifice, God comes in and says, Noah, I bless you. Genesis 9 verse 1. Then God blessed Noah and his sons,
Yes.
telling them to be fruitful and multiply. Remember, they have come out to a new world.
Yes.
Different. It looked very different from what it was initially. But God assures them of his blessings.
Yes.
Tells them to fill the earth and multiply. Then after that, God makes a covenant that he will no longer destroy the earth with a flood.
Yes.
And when we read Genesis chapter 9 verse 16, verse 13, it says, I have set my rainbow in the cloud.
Wow.
And it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. So the rainbow was a seal of that covenant. It was to be perpetual throughout all the generations of the earth, that indeed they will see this rainbow.
Wow.
Which is going to remind them of God's amazing grace that he saved Noah and his family.
Wow, that is impressive. Now, I'll give you the opportunity to give us the final call, but there's a lesson that I want us to understand here. The first thing, the culture that is of God is not defined, it's not based on the paradigm of democracy. We look at ideas and we think an idea is right because many people support it. But we find here only Noah and his family were saved.
Yes.
Why? Because right was right because God said it, not because people consider it popular. An idea should be defined on its whether it's right or wrong based on what God talks about it. So even in the current generation, there are cultures, there are practices, there are ideas, and the question is, what does God say about these ideas? We do things and then we say, as long as many people do it, then it's okay. Or we argue that, could all these people be wrong about this practice or that culture? But we come to realize a very important lesson today. It is God who, after he says a thing, when we follow, it becomes right,
Yes.
not the magnitude of people who follow the idea.
Yes. Dear viewer, just like in Noah's time, the ark was a way of safety. In our day to day, Christ himself is the ark of our safety. Have you given your life to Christ?
Mhm.
Is he your author and the beginner of your faith?
Mhm.
And when you accept him in your life,
Mhm.
indeed he is going to take care of you and protect you and preserve you from the coming destruction. Thank you.
And God bless you. Please join us in our next episode.
Mhm.
God bless you.